these quick little updates in the future. And later on in the call, we'll be looking to get some feedback with respect to that. If you could advance, Jeremy, to the first slide. So this is our proposed outline for today. We're going to talk about the list of bugs that the users developed following the user training. So for those of you that were present in Florida, we had a very good demonstration from InspectTech on Pontis 5.1.2 and the capabilities of 5.1.2, and that was all pretty nice in the sense that we can now support the new AASHTO elements. We have some improved import-export capabilities within the software, and we have some pretty dramatic speed increases that were made in the software. As people have been developing interest in using the new elements, there's been a lot of people touching Pontis 5.1.2 through the testing tag, and a number of items were identified as being bugs in the software that were not in the areas of the program that we had tasked InspectTech to go in and address, primarily the new elements and a little bit in the inspector work candidate area. The feedback that we got in Florida was that, prior to the release of 5.1.2, it was necessary to go back and address these bugs that were in the code, but undiscovered prior to this. And they were primarily undiscovered because no one was really using 5.1 in production, or a very limited number of people. So subsequently, the user group, and if Dave Morgan's on the line, thank you very much. You and Craig did a great job in kind of coordinating all the users and the feedback of the users, and actually produced two lists. One list of bugs is what was called the critical showstoppers, and there was another list of bugs that were less critical that were identified. So we're going to go through those critical bugs with you today and let you know what our resolution or what our action was. In addition, we've added some new features since the user training, and Jeremy's going to go through those, and then talk a little bit about the schedule for release. We originally provided the option for question and answers, and although the task force and InspectTech received no questions in JIRA for this conference, so we won't have anything there specifically. Then we're going to get into talking about the AASHTO element migrator, some proposed enhancements to the migrator, when is the migrator going to be released, and then a little bit about Pontis 5.2 and where we are going with that. So that's our agenda for the day, and our expectation is to make this short and sweet, but to download a lot of information to you quickly. So we hope it works well, and we hope you get some benefit out of this medium. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jeremy, and let you go through the bugs.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. This is Jeremy Schaefer with InspectTech here. We really enjoyed the Pontis Users Group meeting back in September. From that meeting, as Mike mentioned, there was a list of 13 bugs. These were considered critical bugs that the users identified. Some of these were long-standing JIRA tickets that had always existed basically in the Pontis 5X code base. Of those 13 bugs, basically we went through and we asked the users group some questions on them. One of those ones there was really not enough information on, and Dave and others basically removed it from the list, so the list went from 13 to 12. If you look at those bugs, you can see that we discussed them with the task force. Some of them, as you can see from the very first list here, unable to add condition states to newly created elements. We recognize this is a critical issue. As you can see from this list, all of these bugs have been fixed in the new beta version, the release candidate version that will be available tomorrow for the beta tag users. Next to each of these items, you'll see the JIRA ticket number that's associated with it. I won't really go in detail on each of these bugs, but the task force, InspectTech, definitely understood that they were issues that needed to be addressed, and so we went through and we resolved them, and they're going to be resolved in that Beta 6 grouping. So there's actually pure fixes here for 5, 6, 7, 8 of those 12. The other two, two of the 12 were relating to really how dates were handled, and those, there's actually kind of some split in terms of the meaning of how the dates should be handled on certain screens within Pontis. Some people felt the dates weren't being handled correctly. Other people felt that they were being handled correctly. So in discussions with the task force and with individual users, we decided to actually sort of satisfy both camps in terms of adding in a new C option that would allow a state to sort of utilize the date functionality in the way that they saw fit. So there's going to be new flexibility that will handle two of those issues. In addition to the critical bug list, the users group also presented the task force and InspectTech with an itemized list of 35 total items of issues that were deemed non-critical, but that the users wanted resolved. Of those 35 items, we've been addressing them, continue to address them. We wrapped up our release candidate Beta 6 version of the software last night. We're testing it out internally. It will be released tomorrow. But as of the time that we wrapped it up, we had 15 of those 35 issues from the second list were addressed and fixed within the Beta 6 version. So even that second list that the users group said was non-critical, it's not at all something that the task force ignored. It's something that we've been instructed to work on. We want the users to be happy with the software. So we're going back through a lot of these old tickets and trying to resolve them. So like I said, we're almost got half of them from the second list resolved so far. We're anticipating that a good chunk of the remaining ones will be resolved in the next few weeks. There are some items on the list that we really need some additional feedback on. There's probably about 7 or 8 different items that have some questions about that may not be released, patched before the end of the year. But so just wanted to let people know that there is significant progress being made on those issues. Now, there were 2 issues that were identified from the original list that were deferred by the task force. These are things that just because they're deferred does not mean they're not going to be addressed. The very first one was just that the sufficiency rating calculation does take a significant amount of time to do when you apply it to a large population of bridges. Really, we've done a number of internal tests here at InspectTech. The sufficiency rating calculation uses some of the original C++ code, and because of that and the way it's called from the new version, if you're trying to run a sufficiency rating calculation across 20,000 bridges at one time, it takes a very long time and will time out in the software. You can do it bridge by bridge very easily. You can do it in groups of bridges really from about 2,000. We've even done it up to 5,000, no problem. So I would say that there is a workaround on this, in that on those occasions when you want to run a sufficiency rating for every single bridge in your state, and your state inventory is greater than 5,000, you may have to partition up your state inventory and do it by district or by some other grouping. So that's a viable workaround for this. We are, as many of the testers know, working very diligently to try to improve the performance of Pontis. It's something that we've done on a lot of different sections, but this is one that just, right now we have not had the time to go back into the old code and change that. But it's something that there is a very viable workaround for. The last one is something that, we'll ask for the user community help from very infrequently, occasionally when you're using Pontis, various buttons or tabs. This is something you may never have encountered. It may be something that you've seen once every few months, but it's something that occasionally when you're using Pontis, it's a web-based interface now, you'll have a button or a tab just kind of like disappear on you, and it could be a function of the Internet Explorer, or it could be something within the program itself. The really difficulty is we're very willing to risk this, to fix this. We've tried to look into it, but it's something that's very hard to reproduce. So we can't. There's no sequence of steps that you can do to really always reproduce it. So if any user ever comes across a series of steps that you can do to reproduce this, let us know, and we'll use that to fix a problem. So those are two deferred items. There's a lot of exciting new features in Pontis 5.1.2. We'll just highlight a few of them very quickly. One thing from the user group that was requested, it wasn't on either of those lists, but was the ability to do multiple file uploads, so to upload multiple files at the same time instead of attaching them one at a time within the 5X code base. This was, in talking with the task force, this was already part of our 5.2 work plan. They asked us to move it up to meet the user request. So we went ahead, we moved it up, and now it's actually incorporated within Pontis 5.1.2. So that's a new feature that you'll be able to use, and I know we've received some positive feedback on that already. Another new feature which is inherent with the new National Bridge elements, as you recall, Pontis 5.1.2 is basically a release that supports the new AASHTO guide manual for element inspection, which includes the National Bridge elements. And this introduces the concept of parent-child relationships. Working with the task force, we enabled a much improved user interface, I feel, where there's little icons beneath the parent elements and the child elements to show the relationship between protective surfaces or a defect to that parent element. Additionally, many of you are probably very familiar with the PDI files that existed in the past. Those PDI files will still be there, but we've also added the support for XML in, and XML will give you a lot greater capability potentially for interfacing Pontis with other programs and putting it into a more industry standard for exporting and importing data from the system. One thing we noticed too in doing XML is the files can get very large, so we added in a version that's a compressed version. This allows you to export all of your bridges and not have a huge file, but to compress it down into a more reasonable file size. And then some other useful features, and this isn't all of them, but just highlighting a few. We've integrated in the guide manual for element inspection. So if you're in the interface of Pontis and you are looking at a particular element, you can click on a link and it will open up the image of the page from the element guide that directly relates to that particular element. And the new element guide has many useful tables in it to assist the inspectors in rating the particular elements and what condition state they exist in. So I think this will be a good resource for them. Also, even though all of the new data in Pontis 5.1.2 must be done using National Bridge elements, you do have access to the core elements, the old core elements. So if you are having your inspectors starting using this and they want to reference what the old core elements used to be, it's very easy to pop up a window and see those values for comparison purposes. Now, in terms of where we are with Pontis 5.1.2, as I mentioned earlier, we've actually wrapped up this Beta 6, which includes fixes for numerous of these items that the Pontis users group have identified. And this is going to be released to the beta tag tomorrow, November 18th. We were just finishing up our testing on the installation versions to make sure everything goes smoothly. Very soon, really after this, once we get feedback from the beta test users, we will be able to put out, I guess, the acceptance version or the final version. I'm optimistic, very optimistic, that this will be something that will be done by the end of December very easily, and so it will be our Christmas gift to the Pontis user community. So we've made, I think, we've made a lot of progress going back and addressing a backlog of bugs that have been in JIRA, and I think the task force has been very supportive of us going back and fixing those items, and so I think this will make Pontis 512 a very strong software once it is released. And so it will not only will it add the new national bridge elements in, but it will go back and fix a lot of the issues that have just been brought up at user group communities over the past few years. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Francois, and Francois is going to be talking about the element migrator, which also fits into the new version of Pontis.
Thank you, Jeremy. As far as the element migrator is concerned, basically the application was funded by the AASHTO Executive Board, and the intent of the application is to help an agency implement the AASHTO Bridge Element Inspection Manual that was adopted in mid-2010. And the way it does that, it will read your core information and any customized elements that you might have also. And it will migrate them or convert them using a rule set that is written in XML that a user can't edit. And through that process, will actually the end result will be an XML file that Pontis 5.1.2 will be importing and will populate the application, the Pontis application, with a new element. Now, the rule set that we have when we started the testing is vastly different than the rule set that we have today. It's a lot more complete. And last week, the two members of the task force, along with a group of the testing tag, and Alan Marshall, the developer, and his team actually started a rule-by-rule review, and we're going to have a couple more meetings to discuss and finalize rules. And the intent of that would be to have a finalized rule set that gets bundled up with the migrator when it's accepted. A couple of things about the migrator itself. As I mentioned, the rule set was on the small side when the application first rolled out for testing. But as we went through testing, there was a couple of key issues that came up that the testing tag wanted the task force to look into, and we did that. The task force did that last month when we met. And basically, a couple issues dealt with the migrator not being able to associate defect flags, wearing surface, or a protection system to its parent element. So basically, if you had a steel beam with paint, the migrator wouldn't effectively deal with that situation. Related to that, there was a situation that involved children elements and how the units worked with those. So those were a couple of things that the testing tag pointed out, and we, as a task force, discussed those and proposed enhancements to the migrator. Another thing that had come up early in the testing process was that the agency-defined elements, or the custom elements, to migrate those through our testing process was on the cumbersome side. And we, as a testing tag and task force, agreed that there should be an easier way to do this, and this would be another enhancement that Alan's going to be working on. Now, these enhancements are going to be funded from an AASHTO executive board once again, and the intent is to have these enhancements and to make any corresponding enhancements on the Pontis 5.12 side so that these two applications will work seamlessly together and integrate very nicely. Now, as far as the schedule for this migrator, as I mentioned, we're still working on the finalizing rule set, and that's an ongoing effort. Should take a few more weeks. The actual development of the enhancements is anticipated to take about 6 weeks once we get approval, and that would also include the funding approval that I mentioned earlier. The testing tag will test the updated code both on the migrator side and the Pontis side, and we're hopeful that the migrator will be done by the end of the year, and then we'll coordinate with Jeremy and his team to get the needed updates made on the Pontis side also for that integration. And now I think I'm going to be turning it over back to Mike.
Okay, thank you, Francois. So we wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about what the task force is doing going forward. You know, there's a lot of exciting things in terms of what we've done in the last few months, or even really since January or February. But the task force always has to stay a couple of steps ahead of the current development, and so we're actively moving into the development phase for the first portion of Pontis 5.2. And for those of you that have been attending the user meetings for a while, you're probably aware this is scheduled to be a phased-in release. And the primary reason that we're phasing it in is because we just don't have the funding to do it all at one time. And so, you know, we have to sort of scrimp and save to be able to do development while we continue to do support and, you know, and fix bugs and look at enhancements and things. So, you know, there's a fixed amount of license revenue that is coming by virtue of all of you licensing the product, and we have to try to balance that between supporting what we already have, fixing what we already have, versus moving forward. And that's a little bit challenging sometimes. But we do have phase 1 scheduled, and right now the schedule we're looking at late summer of 2012 for its release. And this will have some key features. One of the first items is the ability for agencies to define risks at the bridge level. So this is basically an inspection level attribute that will allow you to pick a bridge and will allow you to go in and define particular risks, such as scour vulnerability, seismic vulnerability, impact vulnerability, things of that nature. Quite a bit of flexibility. It's a fairly generic risk assessment protocol that was developed by the Federal Highway Administration, but it's a necessary first step to being able to do multi-objective optimization. The second necessary step for the multi-objective modeling is to have actions defined. In other words, inspector work candidates are selected from a set of actions, and those actions have to, when selected, need to be able to determine the relative benefit that action will provide to the bridge. And that feature is also slated to be in phase 1. In addition, Pontis 5.2 is going to support the capability of developing projects based on network corridors and or geographic groups of bridges. Those features currently don't exist, nor have they ever existed in Pontis. And so we're going to be building the foundation to establish these network corridors and or these groups of bridges. In addition, the first of the bridge level dashboards, at least the beginning foundational work, will be done in phase 1. So, you know, I know the task force is anxious. I know all of the users are anxious. They want to see 5.2 complete and they want to see it done. And as I mentioned, you know, that takes money. It's not that we don't know what we're trying to do. We have very comprehensive design documents and plans on where we're headed. But to get there, it takes some funds. And so the task force has been exploring additional funding sources to implement Pontis 5.2. Those include federal highway sources, and the task force is looking at the possible solicitation through the AASHTO solicitation process to allow Pontis 5.2 to become available sooner. So that's just a quick little update on what's happened, I guess, since the user training on Pontis 5.2. So with that, I will, if we can go to the next slide, and I will turn it over to Mark Faulhaber.
Hello. The technical review team is a concept that's been used in a number of the other AASHTOWare products. And basically what we're looking to do is to involve more people earlier in the process. And, you know, if you've got some time to spend helping make the product better, then this is a place where you can make your mark. Typically what happens is there will be an area that needs to be defined better or reviewed, and the task force will make assignments to the technical review team, and then the technical review team will meet and make proposals. So there's a number of things that are going to come up in the next couple of years, or in the development cycle of 5.2, that they're going to be pretty interesting, because in some cases there'll be things that have never been done before. An example would be, you know, those utility functions. There's, you know, the calculations around them is pretty well understood, but how to best incorporate that into Pontis and how to easily represent that is a task that I believe we'll be needing some help on. Basically, this is a volunteer thing. Anybody that's interested and that's, you know, has time to work on it, or is willing to make time to work on it, and wants to be a positive team player and be part of the beginnings of this, I encourage you to send just a short resume to me at the email address shown on the screen there, and we'll be putting together a list, and I'll contact you. There will also be a charter for the technical review team it's being drafted now, and it'll be on the web page, and it'll probably, you know, you'll get to see that before you make your commitment. With that, is it Jeremy that's next, or is it you, Mike?
It's back to me. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for joining. You know, the task force was pretty firm on the idea that we wanted this to be very short. We don't want to take up your whole day. We know you're all busy. We hope that, you know, the last 30 minutes have given you kind of a better idea of what's been happening since the user training. And, you know, we hope that you found this format useful or beneficial to you. We, as a task force and development team, we're evaluating this technology for some other potential uses, which may include future product status updates like the one we just did. But we're also considering possibly doing training and providing training to all of our users via this format. And so the task force would be very interested in getting feedback, either positive or negative, on what you thought of the format, you know, any suggestions on things we could do going forward to make it better. And I think that Ala Mohseni, our AASHTO project manager, has volunteered to collect your comments on this webinar and to kind of summarize those for the task force. And then the task force will evaluate, you know, based on your feedback, whether we want to continue to do this kind of event. With that, is there anything else from anybody on the task force or development team that we need to add or discuss? Okay, hearing nothing, again, we'd like to thank you for your time. Hope you found it useful, and we will adjourn this web conference. Thank you.